Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Jody Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. Jana and Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. Jana, I already know you, but Matt, this is the first time I've had the pleasure of speaking with you, but I'm really glad you decided to be here as we're talking about how neurodiverse relationships can work, because there's a lot of misinformation that neurodiverse relationships are just doomed. And so we're trying to set that record straight. So let's start. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
So I'm Jana Smith, and I'm a resilience coach, and I met Jody through a Neurodiverse Practitioners Network. And so we meet once a month as a group and talk about all things neurodiversity. I personally have ADHD, which was a journey that I embarked on 2.5 years ago, was when I got diagnosed. And my work journey began before my diagnosis journey. But for a long time now, I've helped people learn how to regulate their nervous system, and that helps them with chronic symptoms, relationships, and a whole host of other things, because when we're regulated, we feel a whole lot better.
And I just want to say to the listeners and watchers that what Jana does is so helpful and important. And in this group of providers that she mentioned, this panel that meets once a month, she shared some of her tools with us at times when we're just discussing what kind of resources are out there. And Jana, you have some amazing tools, and I know I've sent people to you. And so we will definitely be putting links to you in the show notes. And I encourage you, if you have nervous system dysregulation, which will you explain to our listeners and watchers what you mean by that?
Sure, yeah. So when the brain detects any sort of danger, whether it's real or perceived, it'll go into a dysregulated state. So the most common that people are familiar with is fight or flight, but there are a couple of other states that the nervous system can go into, such as fawn, functional freeze, and a freeze state. And when we're dysregulated, we're prepared to fight or respond or get away, and that helps us when there's a true emergency. But if our brain is either easily triggered, as can sometimes happen for neurodivergent individuals, or if we are from trauma or stress or any other life circumstances, if our brain gets stuck in a kind of a chronic state of dysregulation, then that can really derail our health. We can develop chronic symptoms, autoimmune diseases, and it's also not good for our relationships, because we can become more reactive and more easily triggered with our partner or our kids or our extended family. And for me personally, and for clients that I work with, learning to work with that system, understanding how it works, and identifying in yourself signs of dysregulation, and then having really practical tools to empower you to regulate is absolutely life-changing.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation for everybody, because we talk about neurodiversity and executive dysfunction, and one of those being emotional regulation, which is closely tied to the nervous system regulation that you talked about. So it's such a thing that the neurodiverse community experiences. Yeah. Okay. So Matt, tell us about you. Let's hear about you.
So I'm an engineer, and in some ways I'm a typical engineer in that I love solving problems, whatever they are. In some ways I'm not a typical engineer. I'm left-handed. I've got some artistic stuff. I like woodworking's a hobby. I like designing the furniture that I build, stuff like that. So yeah, some ways normal, some ways
Not.
artistic. Yes.
But it's interesting. I actually see that pairing of traits pretty regularly with the engineers that I work with. And even in my own family, my son is actually in university right now in studying engineering. And he's also extremely creative. Like, he composes music and is writing his first novel right now. So it's interesting that your perspective on that is that's atypical. Do you think so?
Not all engineers are the nerdy, all they can do is think work type of stuff. They can still be in touch with their emotions. There are some that have decent emotional IQ. You'll get the occasional one that does not. and it's awkward interacting. They're not all that way.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm glad you said that because it really is a myth that engineers are just these bot-like, non-emotional human beings, which is really not the case, really, completely ever. As far as neurodiversity goes, would you consider yourself neurodivergent or no?
No, I would say I see some of those characteristics in one of my parents. I don't consider myself that way. When we took some self-assessment tests, I tested very negative for both ADHD and autism. I am very high energy, though. And so sitting around isn't fun for me. So there are some aspects where it looks sort of ADHD-like, where I'm going to be moving, I'm going to be doing something, I'm going to have a leg bouncing because I've got energy. But other than that, I don't test as any of those things.
Executive function wise and everything, he can run laps around me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, and that's another myth too, that all engineers are neurodivergent. And a lot of people, I know for me, if I hear engineering, it's okay, let's investigate this more. But like you said, not everybody is just because they're really skilled in that area. Maybe a trait here or there because it sounds like you've got some genetics there, but that doesn't mean that you've got enough of those traits to call it a pattern of neurodiversity, which is the way I explain neurodivergence to others, is that we've got traits, and then when we start seeing patterns grouped together, then we call that pattern ADHD, or we call that pattern autistic, or sensory differences, that kind of thing. So the topic of this particular podcast series is that neurodiverse relationships can and do work. So the two of you are a ADHD neurotypical with maybe a trait or two couple. So talk to me about you guys and about your relationship. What do you think's important or relevant for people to hear?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we ran into sort of with the way that we're both wired is a thinker-feeler dichotomy. So I tend to be more emotional, more likely to be reactive. Matt is very logical. He likes everything to go through the logical filter. And we're trying to work together as a couple that could set up some interesting differences in communication styles, preferences, what seems safe or scary emotionally. And so I think that's where we entered into this dynamic, of course, me for several years undiagnosed and scrambling for ways to help myself regulate and also trying to use Matt to regulate at times. And for him, really coming from a very logical family that kind of likes to keep their feelings to themselves. There was a really wide gap between the way that we thought this would work.
And I would also say, if there's conflict or something, we both go more in that direction. I'm thinking, oh, okay, we're having conflict here. Time to be really calm, really logical. And then Jana's probably going the other direction.
He wants to take lots of breaks, get away to regulate, calm, not deal with it if we don't have to. And I want to engage. Let's work it out. Let's work it out. So that created a bit of a cycle for us.
Yeah. So you said it created a cycle. Have you come around to finding balance in the way you handle it differently?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it took us a long time and we needed definitely some outside support for that. But yeah, with some specific tools, Matt's the one who remembers to pause. He's the one who remembers to do active listening and reflect back what he heard because his brain isn't in overdrive like mine is. So yes, so I think the fact that we have that different wiring did help to, like you said, bring balance and slow us down.
So I'm curious. I have an analogy that I use where you're talking about, Jana, you having more of the emotional response, and Matt, you having more of the problem solver logical response. I kind of look at emotions and gut and intuition as being our compass, and then logic and reason being our roadmap. So the emotions point us in a direction of, is this good, bad, scary? And then the roadmap kind of tells us what to do next and how to problem solve. Does that resonate with you guys at all? And if so, how or how not?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to use the compass and you just wanted to use the map. So we were like fighting over what tool to use.
Which means you may have been going in different directions at times too, like you said. Matt, what are your thoughts?
If I had the motion, it's okay, I'm feeling something. And then there's the immediate logical, okay, is this reasonable for me to be feeling this? Why am I feeling this? And then straight into kind of try to understand where to go with that.
Which works for you. But then if is what Jana's feeling reasonable, then we were in hot water really fast.
Right. When you apply that, is what Jana's feeling reasonable, then that starts to evaluate emotion. And then that does get you into a pickle with that.
And some of what you'll hear here is where we've come from, not so much where we're at now.
And so I was actually just about to ask you if you could walk me through that a bit so that people can hear what that has looked like through the years so that they can hear where you have come from and how you got to where you are now. So how long have you been married and just walk me through some of that timeline?
Yeah, we've been married for 24 years. We got married pretty young. And I think the first presentation of it was as we hit this dichotomy, and I was wanting to use the compass and Matt was wanting to use the map. When I felt emotionally abandoned or evaluated and he wanted to retreat, I would wanted to escalate. And for me, there was a whole series of things that happened for over a couple of years that were really stressful for me. But I ended up in a place of such dysregulation that I got chronically ill. So our entry point was my bottom of the pit. It wasn't so much about our relationship anymore, but I'm trying to survive and not be sick and get out of bed and eat food and whatever. And so in the process of that's how I discovered all of the nervous system regulation work. And so for me, it was really about me working on me for a while, learning how to self-regulate and getting well and being able to be a mom and parent my little kids and all of that. So once that stabilized, kids are in school, I'm doing better, all of that, then it was like, okay, how do we try to work together again in terms of get out of survival mode? Because we were just working together to try to feed everybody and get people to sleep. And we weren't really thinking about trying to connect or solve conflict or whatever. So after that, then it was like, okay, how can we work on our relationship? And I went to counseling for a couple of years and worked on the idea of differentiating. So I'm okay, even if you're not okay. And I don't need you to help me self-regulate and all of that. And so that was a couple-year process for me. And then we hit a point where, okay, now how can we work together? We sought some counseling and it was helpful in terms of giving us some basic tools. But I feel like that counselor didn't really understand neurodivergence. And it was a little bit more of a surface take on like typical tools are try to communicate, give each other pauses, take breaks and whatever. But we were still, I feel like, struggling somewhat after that. I don't know if you want to pick up and give any input before I just.
Yeah. What I would say is both of our coping mechanisms reinforced unhealthy coping mechanisms. If Jana escalated, I felt like, oh, I need to back off more. I need space. I need whatever. And as soon as I pulled away, she'd be grasping for connection. There'd be more escalation because that would be her coping mechanism and mine was to retreat. And so it's like we were doing what made sense to us, but it was counterproductive.
Yeah, driving you even farther apart.
And I would say in Jana's counseling and her learning to be more self-regulated, that made it much safer for me to engage. So in some ways, I would say Jana took the first steps in bringing things back together by her doing that. That kind of made it like, okay, this is safe for me to engage because it's not like it's going to escalate to a huge fight or something. And so that made a huge difference.
And I would say for us, escalation, that can be a really vague term. It wasn't like yelling, screaming, and name calling and stuff like that. It was just, I would make more and more intense efforts to get Matt to talk to me. And he would want to be setting boundaries. I don't want to talk about this today or whatever. And I would like leave him alone for 20 minutes and then come back and be like, please, can we work it out before we go to bed? So that was what our escalation looked like. And sometimes it would be tears or pleading or text bombing, like more and more messages trying to get a response. But it was nothing, it never got volatile for us, I would say. So it was definitely hard and hurtful and whatnot. But thankfully, it never went to a place of really inappropriate interaction for the most part.
Which some people do get to that place. Jana, learning what you have about nervous system regulation, can you talk to our listeners here about what you know now about how your ADHD traits and what other kinds of traits, your personal histories, or what all has contributed to that kind of anxious pursuit of the resolution? And I know that it's that relief that you're seeking in that moment, that reconnection, that relief. And when you're not getting it, it makes your anxiety skyrocket and it really dysregulates the nervous system. So what have you learned about what all's contributing to that response for you and how to walk yourself through it?
That's a really good question. I think one of the contributing factors was just family of origin. And some of the work we did in counseling was I have that anxious, insecure attachment and Matt has more of the avoidant attachment. And so that's always a spicy dynamic. I mean,
and a real common one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me, I feel safe if I know I'm connected. And so that was driving it, but it became that impulsiveness that I think was driven by the ADHD of I could, in a moment, hear a boundary and walk away. And then, like you were saying, the anxiety would go up and up. And I think I need to re-engage because I don't want to go to sleep till I know that we're okay or we're connected or that I'm not feeling cut off or worried or when will it get resolved. So I just wanted to know the resolution was going to happen right now. And that sense of urgency, I think, was ADHD driven because I went on stimulant medication. And as soon as I did, that dropped significantly. That urgency of needing to resolve, especially before bed, because I found that sort of the accumulation of an understimulated brain throughout the day would peak at 8 p.m. So if there was anything maybe bothering me or any little things floating around in the air between us, I wanted to resolve it between 8 and 10 p.m., which is a terrible time to have a conversation because then you can't go to sleep, right? But my brain would tell me you can't go to sleep unless you fix this right now. So in terms of the nervous system and self-regulation work, one of the kind of foundational tenets is not every message your brain tells you is true or accurate. So being able to recognize when my brain says it's 8:30 and, oh yeah, I got this text earlier and it just didn't really feel good. Now we got to go work it out. Maybe that's a false message. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I'll sleep on it and I won't even care tomorrow. And so those urgent messages aren't necessarily true. And I think that was really important to understand. I understood it for a number of years before I could fully act on it in the way that I wanted to, because I started working on this 8 years before I got medication. So I was doing a lot of hard work and it became much easier to implement what I wanted to with the medication support.
Yeah. And Matt, I want to get your response because I saw your expression when she brought up the 8:30. I saw you go, oh. So I want to hear from you about that. But I want to just respond to something you said that is something I had to learn myself too, because I was also only recent, like in the last year, even realized I'm ADHD, which is like a big duh because I'm in this field and I'm focused on everybody else and recognizing and can spot it a mile away in everybody else. And as you probably know, it wasn't until a colleague said to me, one of the people in the group that was Mona K, everybody's probably heard of her, who's listening, said, you're ADHD too, right? And I'm like, oh, and it just, so many things made sense. And what you just described, I can relate to so much. But interestingly, I'd already started building in so many coping mechanisms, even before I really understood the label as applying to me. And one of the things, I actually saw this on a bumper sticker years ago, and I adopted it, and it's been my tagline on email, or it was for years, was don't believe everything you think. Because I was like, oh, that is so real, especially with anxiety. And when we have this nervous system dysregulation and ADHD, where you're talking about how by the end of the day, the brain is depleted of dopamine. And you didn't say that specifically, but we're depleted at that point, and we need to get some kind of relief, especially if there's this unresolved something that's hanging in the balance. It's like the ADHD brain's got to finish it and got to fix it. And then we're listening to all those messages that we need to learn how to put on trial and say, just because I'm thinking this doesn't mean it's actually what I'm thinking. And so let's give this some time to simmer a little bit while I sleep. Because like you said, oftentimes wake up the next morning, we're refreshed, we're renewed, and it's like, oh, that really isn't that big of a deal for me anymore. And people are like, yeah, but I've always learned never go to sleep angry. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Sometimes that's what you need to do. Okay, Matt, what are your thoughts on all of this?
First, I'll apply to your last statement that don't go to sleep angry. So yeah, don't go to sleep angry, but you might still have an unresolved issue. I remember before Jana had some of these tools, it's like she had so many things going in her head. And I'm like, let's have a notebook by your bedside. You can write these things down and stop thinking about them because it's written down. You're like, okay, I've got it written down. I won't need to think about this. It's not like I'm going to forget it. It's right here, but I can stop thinking about it. As far as the 8:30 or 10 o'clock is usually when it hit. Myself, I like to be doing something calm and relaxing, watching a YouTube woodworking video or something to be getting sleepy at night. And because I'm more of a night owl, and so if I need to do stuff that's going to be making it easy for me to fall asleep. Jana's not. She's a go to bed earlier type. And so that combination of me wanting to do calm things, her needing to go to bed, but then we have some difficult conversation at night, it's the worst possible times for us.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work out well. And anytime you feel like you have a hard stop or a deadline on the end, or sometimes even if you don't, and so it's like it can just keep going forever. Neither one of those are necessarily great situations.
No, it's not. And we even got into a pattern where that anxious and avoidant played out where it'd be maybe 8 p.m. and Matt's chilling on the couch and I'd walk into the room and he'd be looking at me, scanning to see, is she even slightly activated? Because I don't even want to talk to you. If he, you know how that becomes so unconsciously embedded? I might look at him and think, oh no, there's an emotional wall up. Now I really have to punch my way through the wall. And he'd be looking at me going, tonight's not a good night to have a conversation. I can tell from the way you walked in the room.
And there again, that's that you're activating each other, triggering each other, which becomes this snowball effect. So, Jana, I think it's really important that you've talked about the work that you did, that you recognized, okay, this is stuff I need to do, because a lot of people, neurotypical partners, are regularly saying, why do I have to do all the work? Why do I have to do all the accommodating? Why do I have to learn about it? And my partner just gets to say, oh, I'm neurodivergent, I'm ADHD, or I'm autistic. You have to accommodate me. And I'm always saying that's not how it works. We're all accountable for our own stuff. And if you're with a partner who absolutely refuses to do any of that work, then that's another conversation we need to have. That's a harder conversation. So I think it's really helpful that you shared that you recognized, okay, some of this is on me. Some of this is my stuff. And then, Matt, you're saying, okay, it's not that I'm not accountable. It's that once Jana did take that first step, it really helped our relationship as a whole and then helped me to engage. So then what do you see was your part, and what kind of work have you done to now say, okay, this is the work I need to do in our relationship as well?
So ideally, I would say when a couple realizes their challenge, they both realize at the same time and they go work on it. That
Ideally.
wasn't the case. I thought I didn't have a problem, and once Jana got herself regulated, we'll be good. And it was awfully nice of her to work on herself. And I would say I was in some ways stubborn. I didn't want to need counseling. There's things where you don't really want to have something wrong with you. You don't want to have someplace where it's, oh, here's an area where I need to grow. As it was, we saw couples counselors, and some were helpful, some were not. And there was a coach I saw for a while who it was helpful working with her, just as far as there were tools that I got from it that were useful that I put into practice from the logical side of the brain, where it's like, okay, remember to do this. These are the things that help Jana to feel heard. The active listening, Jana mentioned that's amazingly helpful. If I do that, then it works great, because Jana, I don't know if I should speak for you here. A core value of hers is being heard and understood. And if I'm just sitting here saying, okay, understanding everything that she's saying, she doesn't believe in her head that I understand what she's saying. But if I actively basically restate back to her, oh, I've heard you say this. This is my understanding of it. It's, oh, she gets it. And she stops making the same argument, making the same point, because it's, oh, I've been heard. That's like, wow, this works out great for me too. Because if I do that, then it's like she feels heard. And I don't have to keep hearing the same thing where I'm like, okay, you said this to me 4 times. Did you think I didn't get it the first 3? And it feels like it's just beating you over the head at that point. And so a simple tool like active listening was really productive for us. Yeah, I don't know. That's the types of things that I was learning. I guess the other one I learned was you have a best self that you, after you've had an argument or something, you think, gosh, if I had just said it this way, instead of the not nice way I said it earlier, this whole conversation would have gone differently. And it's, there was a Jim Wilder podcast I was wanting to, where he talked about, I don't remember exactly what it was. He said like the thinking brain versus kind of the reactive brain. And this is all in my own words at this point, but if I could pause in our conversations and figure out, okay, what would my best self say at this point? If I really thought through this, if I didn't just react in how I responded, but I thought, what would my best self say? And take the pause and say something like that. A lot of our conversations didn't spiral badly. And so that was the other main thing I think I took from the counseling and the work that I did that's really been helpful for us.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say there is not only are you working to understand Jana and what Jana needs in those moments to feel heard, to feel affirmed, but you're also looking at what can I do differently in these conversations, and which will then ultimately benefit us both and help us as a couple. And I think what you said about pausing to think about the best self, that's so important. I know I'm constantly telling couples to use that pause button. I call it the pause button, to slow down the pace, slow it down. It's okay. We don't have to resolve it right this second. Sometimes you need to stop and reflect on, you want to do that reflective listening piece and make sure you're really hearing each other as much as you can. But then sometimes before you still try to push toward, okay, now what? You need to stop and reflect on what this means. And then how does my best self show up here? Because when we're activated, if either one of you starts to get activated, that best self is not going to show up. It's just not. Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, either one of you, to that conversation?
Yeah. I noticed we're using reflective listening there as well.
It's wired into me at this
Yeah.
point.
And so the other thing that I found that was interesting with reflective listening is sometimes I would do that for Jana and she would pause like, oh, that's not quite how I wanted to say that. That isn't quite what I meant to say. And so where there was the potential for a misunderstanding, it could get clarified immediately without me taking, okay, here's what I heard you say. Okay, I'll run with that. And that may not have been what
Yes.
she meant to say, but those
Yes.
are the words that came out, or that's how I understood what she said.
Yes, absolutely. And Jana, I think you probably know, but Matt, you wouldn't know. I have an entire communication course and model around what you just said, where I break communication into 4 distinct stages. And one is, what are we bringing to it before the conversation even starts? I have a backpack analogy. What's in our backpack, which it's everything that makes us who we are in that moment, like a virtual backpack. So what are we bringing to it? And then how do we actually interact in that? What are we saying? How do we say it? When do we say it? Is it 8:30 at night? But then that third stage is the meaning we take from it. And that's where so much hurt and confusion and misunderstandings come from, is when we don't really understand the meaning of what our partner has just communicated, or they don't understand us. And it's so important to spend some time in that stage of communication where I'm making sure I know what you mean. And especially with neurodiverse couples, because we even use language differently sometimes. Men and women, we have differences as human beings. And the way we use phrases and terms, and we just use them differently. So it's important to get that meaning, because then that fourth stage is we store it. That's our narrative now. And that goes into the backpack, and that influences how we show up again the next time. So that's just to piggyback on what you had just said. Okay, so I know that the two of you had thought about some things that you wanted to share today, and I wanted to give you a chance. Is there anything that you think it would be really important to talk about and let people know about?
Sure. First, I want to give some credit and kudos to Barbara Grant. She's a neurodiverse couples coach, and she was the one who brought a couple of those critical toolbox pieces. And I think, Jody, you probably have some similar resources, but she had a very simple active listening guideline, and then she also had a problem-solving worksheet that both of those were really helpful to change the trajectory of those kinds of conversations. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. And thank you, Barbara. So the other thing that I think is really interesting, just to touch on what you were mentioning about how we make meaning differently. And we absolutely do that. I guess the best analogy to explain how I like to talk, a verbal processor, my brain moves really quickly. And I tend to use rounding, approximations. Rather than stopping and thinking about the perfect word, I'll grab the closest to it word. And so I tend to be sloppy in the precision of what I'm trying to communicate, because I just want to get it out there. Matt is very much say exactly what you mean. He's thoughtful. He talks slower and processes more slowly. And so sometimes my sloppy rounding means that he'll take meaning from it that really wasn't what I intended at all. So we've run into that as well. And one of the biggest things that has helped us to even unpack and see that, because that can be happening and you don't know what's happening. You just feel so frustrated that the other person doesn't understand you. So a couple of years ago, we started using voice memos on our phones to record every single difficult conversation that we were having. Any conversation that could go sideways, we just hit the record button. And that did a couple of things. This was actually, I think, Matt's idea. Was it your idea?
I was just thinking, it never hurts to have a recording that you don't need and you throw away. But we had many of them we wish we'd started it earlier.
Yeah.
Where it started to get rocky and we're like, oh, we should be recording this, but we missed the first half or whatever. But it did a couple of things. One, it helps you to be that best self part of your brain that Matt was describing earlier, of that Jim Wilder concept. Because if you know the recording's on, it's just that extra layer of maybe I'll think a little bit.
I don't really want this to be recorded to go down in the history here.
Okay. So there's that. It just slows you down a tiny bit and makes you more aware. But it helped us to unpack. We have an example here of here's how the conversations went before we were recording. Something might happen and I would say, it really hurt my feelings when you said that.
But I didn't say that.
Yeah, you did. You said blah, blah, blah. And then you said that thing. Remember?
I think I would remember if I said that. I do not remember saying that.
I know I heard it or I wouldn't have brought it up. And it really bothered me.
What do you, I don't, how do I apologize for something I don't remember saying?
I'm hurt.
I'm sorry you heard.
Okay. So we would get
You said that. I love that.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Now break it down for us.
Yeah. So this was our traffic jam. Every time we had it wouldn't matter if we were talking about something like logistics for kids or actually something between us. Somewhere in the conversation, and we were on both sides of this. So it was one or the other of us. It wasn't just me saying I'm hurt, because this would happen to Matt too. But whatever it was that was hurtful, we could never agree on the fact it had actually been said or communicated. And I went through a period of time where I'm like, is this gaslighting? But it was like, no, he genuinely actually, it wasn't to undermine me or make me crazy. He actually had a different perception of what had happened. So we started doing these recordings. What do you like?
We got to the point where I would say, I don't remember saying that. You remember? I probably said it. I don't remember it. And I guess I would apologize for it, but it would still leave her unsatisfied.
Yeah.
I don't remember saying that. And so
I really don't.
It's
remember.
really hard to apologize for something. It's hard to apologize for something you're thinking, I didn't do that. I didn't say that.
I genuinely don't remember that. Yeah.
Because I'm an extremely honest person, and it feels almost dishonest to say you're sorry for something you didn't think you did.
Yeah.
She can tell that I don't think I did it. And that doesn't feel satisfying for her.
Yeah. So the recordings helped us to understand where we were taking the same content and making opposite meaning out of it. So we would go back and listen and be like, right there, when you said that, that's what I'm talking about. Oh my goodness, that isn't what I meant at all. Or, oh, that's what you thought. So we started to unpack that, and you can get really in the weeds with that. You could spend hours and hours unpacking conversations. But I think we needed to see, okay, I'm not crazy. I do have a reasonable memory. Yes, there's things I'm not forgetting. Okay, I said that maybe a little bit more edgy than I meant to. So there was a lot of awareness and self-reflection that we were able to do from those recordings, but it just got us out of that total gridlock. It didn't solve it per se, but it helped us to see how there was that difference in the way that we were seeing and how our memories worked differently than each other, and to clarify a lot of things that, yeah, that was a sloppy thing where I was rounding. That wasn't really what I meant. Or you thought I was angry, but I was actually anxious, or whatever. There's lots of different iterations of that.
I love that strategy. And it's something that I've had couples do. And I've actually had them bring those recordings in with me in session so that we can go through it. And there are so many things that influence how we interpret and the meanings that we take, including confirmation bias. Sometimes the brain hears what it's expecting to hear instead of what's actually being said. And then our brain also sometimes fills in. Sometimes we're thinking about what we're going to say next and not really actively listening to what our partner's saying. And so we're kind of like, yeah, okay. But then we store it the way we were expecting them to say, as if that's what they really did say. I think recording conversations is such a helpful tool that I've used too. And I love that you guys shared how it's helped you. The other piece of it that you mentioned is sometimes with neurodivergence, that self-regulating piece, that executive function of self-monitoring cannot engage sometimes. And not just with neurodivergence. Anytime somebody's even activated or it's a stressful topic, sometimes the self-regulation, we don't self-monitor what we're saying. And when, like you said, when we know we're being recorded, it adds this invisible third party almost that forces us or reminds us to self-monitor. And it just keeps the conversation a lot more civil a lot of times and keeps us grounded. So I love that you shared that. And the role play was awesome. That was really great. Okay, we're going to stop there for part 1 of my chat with Jana and Matt. And part 2 is the final episode for season 5. So be sure not to miss that final episode. And then we'll be taking a little break before we start up with season 6. But I will be shooting some bonus episodes to you in the meantime. So be sure to stay tuned in and subscribe to make sure you get updates of new episodes. But also, please be sure to like and follow or leave a review so the podcast platforms know that you're enjoying this podcast. So I'll see you in a couple of weeks for part 2. That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodycarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodycarlton.com. Until next time.